At this point, I'd say it's the norm for us to attain an opinion and stand by it, but sometimes as time passes, our opinions change. We acquire new information and change our views on things, and unfortunately that applies to reviews and critiques of things as well. Hey guys, I'm Tiller. I make weekly YouTube videos about gaming and gaming related content, and I also livestream on Twitch at twitch.tv/tillerbrick, link is in the description. So, what is this even about? Well, I feel like I should address the fact that what this video is aiming for, or aiming at, is my reviews, and particularly how I put them together. When you walk away from a game that you are having fun playing, it's hard to push away the high and the good feelings to face the fact that there are points that you may find questionable or just bad. While this doesn't happen completely to me, as I've kind of learned how to push away that feeling, ultimately what I mean to say is that my reviews come out quick in order to play into the algorithm, and are sometimes not what my opinion will be in months or weeks later. That being said, the reviews you see me put out are my full opinions upon completing the game. They are genuine. It's just that as time goes on, I sit on my opinions and I discuss the game with others, and those opinions can change. I still believe what I say in the videos, but it's hard to walk away from the fact that I have more to say about the games I review than when I initially reviewed them. That's why I want to potentially create more series of videos where I can talk about my thoughts on the games that I play, and as I discuss them, my thoughts way post-launch later. And a lot of you might be here from my Scarlet Nexus videos, and I'll admit that I still do like the game a lot. My review is pretty outdated though, since we're now 4 months since the game launched, and I've had a lot of time to talk about the game and also play the second route, which I had not completed upon writing and sending out my review. I don't feel too differently about the game from what I said in my review, but I have some things to add. For example, I felt that the concept was good, but the execution could have been done differently. I don't exactly want to push through the same story beats a second time, let alone at the level you play on New Game Plus 4 in order to get all of the content within the game. You are pretty much heavily over-leveled, and while you can turn those things off, it's just kind of hard to want to even do that, because you're essentially playing through the same story again, and having a lot of important parts spoiled by just dialogue within Yuito's route really puts a damper on how I felt about playing through the game a second time. And I feel like the game could have been structured differently so that you switch protagonists between parts in order to lay out the story and the characters better. I feel in the end there is so little variation past Phase 10 that it's kind of pointless to push through the game just to see the same ending and same cutscenes as I had mentioned in my review. I felt that the end segments really overstayed their welcome with the lack of enemy variety, and ultimately, I still do like the game. And while I'm unsure if this team is remaining on this IP, or moving back to Code Vein, or moving to something new, I remain excited for their next game. Now, on the other hand, Tales of Arise is a game that I hoped I would love a lot more than I did. I don't think the game is bad by any standard, and watching some of the high-skill combos is a blast, but I think what falls flat for me is just the final boss. When I face a final boss in a video game, or specifically a JRPG, I expect there to be a feeling of payoff. When I fought the Great Spirit of Rena, I felt like I was fighting something that kind of just exists, and when I fought Volron, I felt like the fight wasn't earned. It doesn't ruin the game for me, but it sticks in my head of how little I cared for the final boss or bosses. Unfortunately, the way Tales of Arise handles its final bosses, and really that segment, does weigh it down for me a bit more than I'd like to admit. It's one of those things that I think has a good concept behind it if it was built on differently in the story. However, the story doesn't really introduce this idea of the Great Spirit and the astral energy having a voice until the second, what you would call the second arc after the second OP plays. Once you get into that, they introduce this idea. And by the time you reach the end, it feels like something that needed to be built on more. The second half, or I guess you would call it half of the story of Tales of Arise, kind of feels like it plays too much on exposition, and I don't mind it playing a lot on exposition at that point, but there is so much to take in that it feels like there should have been something to space that out, to make it feel like the time between you learning about astral energy having a voice and developing that into a greater concept to help you understand and help you feel like the Great Spirit Rena actually matters. Maybe, in fact, giving vocals or a voice actor or actress to both the Great Spirit Dana and the Great Spirit Rena, or the astral energy of both. As Rinwell mentions that she can't totally hear a voice, but she can kind of understand it, is something that they should have done. And it does kind of hurt my experience with the game because of how they take this idea that you have the Great Spirit, but we don't. All we get is Rinwell's exposition of how the Great Spirit feels. There is no build on it, there's no emotion towards it, and that kind of frustrates me. And I've spoken about Volron enough in my main review, but I bring it up here again because it is one of those things that feels like a lack of care, or not lack of care, but a lack of development on the character. And it really does stick out to me in that regard. And with Scarlet Nexus, the final boss actually felt like something that was built up to, and the reason why I compare Scarlet Nexus and Tales of Arise is purely on the fact that they're both recent JRPGs that I can compare it to, or that I can compare each other to. And Karn feels like a boss that is built up through the story, and he's not necessarily someone that you fight because he's trying to destroy the world or anything, but it is because there is some kind of build up to him, and he's developed through the narrative as this character with this one motivation, and that one motivation will destroy the world because he refuses to help. He refuses to help the main characters stop the destruction of the world, and he is needed to do that. It ultimately comes down to the idea that a final boss should be something more than just a concept that is developed very slightly. It should be something that has a payoff at the end. Neither the ending for Scarlet Nexus nor the ending for Tales of Arise is bad, but these two things have been stuck in my mind for the past few months or month, and I thought that I would want to talk about them, but I never found the appropriate way to do so. And while my reviews are still representative of my final opinions on the game, there is something more I wish I could say about it, but it's hard to publish that in a way that doesn't feel like I'm just putting together a 30-second clip to talk about. And what I want to say within this video is essentially that there's so much more to games than reviews can say, especially reviews that have to come out either before the game releases or too soon after the game releases. And I'm not bound by any obligations to give the game's high scores or sing praises on a game. I'm just a guy who wants to share his opinions and even discuss that with others and see what they think of the games I've played as well. This discussion can alter my opinion on a game, and so far, it's been very slight, but there are times I just want to go back and talk about the games I've reviewed already. Even then, I've only been at this for 4 months, and I'm sure with time I'll get better at it. I hope to be able to share more refined and better written reviews in the future. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next week.